Right. Good morning. How we doing? I just have few topics to cover before we go into the JavaScript framework, which I mentioned last time. What is the name again? Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap, for us to be able to create responsive and functional websites. Okay, so I know I gave us an assignment. Was it this class? What did I say you should go and research on? I should research on what? Okay, mouse events. So how many of them did you find out outside the click? I think we only use a click, right? Can you just read them out under additional mouse events you discover? Who is starting? Who wants to start? Okay, where are the people that did the assignment? Raise up your hand. Did the assignment? Yes, that was one of the assignments. Have you? How many of us did that one? You did it? What about you? Different what? Application with event listener concept, right? And it worked for you, right? All right. So the truth of it is that we have to be disciplined to ourselves, whether somebody check it or not. You should make sure that you do it because for your own good, though. It's for your own good to expand your knowledge on this. Like I told us when we started, JavaScript is very wide. So there's no way. What we try to do as instructors is to try and develop you to that standard or basic where you can research and be able to understand what you find out. All right, so in this section, I just want to still use the JavaScript DOM method to validate our form. How many of us have heard of form validation? So I'm supposed to have completed this form validation before the add event what? Listener, because we have treated the method that will be involved, which is document.getElement by ID. But I just have to go back and then I will now come back to complete few other examples under the add event listener before we round off with JavaScript object and array. So once I've covered these topics that I mentioned, then we are very safe to start exploring Bootstrap. And then, like I said, most of the JavaScript implementation, they are done through what? Bootstrap. Most of the implementation. But that does not mean that you can sacrifice time to build or customize your app, because Bootstrap means that you are leveraging on what has been what? Built. That is why it's referred to as a library or a framework. So you are not supposed to use Bootstrap and start learning the language from scratch. So it's more or less of implementing or a platform for implementing Java what? Scripts, file or functions. All right. So what is form validation? Can anybody tell us what do we mean by form validation? Because we are going to be hearing this word often when we start the back end. We are going to be hearing form validation, form validation. How many of us have once filled a form in a website, and then when you omit supplying or giving a particular data, and then you try to submit, they reverse you back that certain field must be filled before the form can be submitted? I mean, of us have experienced that. That action is what? It means that that particular form was what? Validated by the developer. Or how many of us have filled a form and then you try to enter wrong email format, and then you get an error that your image format is wrong? It must contain the @ symbol. You must have experienced that as well, right? All these are different form of what? Validation. So it now depends on you as a developer to choose the criteria for your validation. And that criteria will be based on what you feel that the user must give you, must fill, the data they must what? Submit. Just imagine you create or build a form that will help people to register for a program, and you did not mandate them to submit their email and their phone number. So you allow them to fill the form without submitting those information. Do you think it makes sense? How do you reach out to them? How do you follow up when you did not collect any of their contacts? So that particular form you are designing, you need to be able to know what and what you want to validate. So I have a sample that I want to use to teach us. It means if this particular one did not meet the validation you intend to do, you add research to it and be able to what? To get it done once you are able to know the kind of validation you want. So I'm starting with form validation. Form validation. And what will this form validation ensure that the user do? The form validation, right? The form validation checks if users enter correct information before submitting a form. That is the essence of form validation. I said it checks if the users what? If the users enter correct information before submitting a form. So an example, let me quickly create another file, and then let me name it form validation. .html, form validation .html, and let me activate my HTML default file. And then of course, let me also create my JavaScript. So I'll just name the JavaScript as form var.js. So I think the last class we worked with external JavaScript, right? Let me work with internal, which means that there's no need for this JavaScript. So I'll write both my HTML code and what? JavaScript code in the same file, just to refresh our memory. So our HTML document will be here, and then just before the closing body tag, I will create what? Script tag, which will envelope all my JavaScripts. So all my JavaScript will be spoken here, and then my HTML will be here. So I'm using one file, which is called internal way of implementing JavaScript. So as you write your example, we start with the HTML example. You write the HTML file, then later you write the So form, let's say what? JS form validation. Form validation. Or HTML form validation with JavaScript. Because you can also validate with PHP. You understand? You can decide to ship the whole of this validation to PHP, or you validate them with what? JavaScript. So what that kind of website will do is that it will be faster because the PHP is now less, working because we have allocated some of the tasks to what? JavaScript. So let's say HTML form validation with JS, right? So the first thing is for me to quickly create my form. I believe we still remember how to create form. Are you sure we still know how to create form? Okay. So I'm going to add, I believe during your research on that assignment, you must have come across another word, JavaScript event, which is called on submit. On what? Submit. That is what we are using to trigger the function, because we are going to create function in JavaScript that will react as soon as the user click on the submit button. So that function, for us to implement it inline, how many of us know that this is inline implementation of what? JavaScript, right? This is inline. And what does this mean? It means that we are going to create a function that will return. Let's say we are going to return. What are we returning? We are returning validation. We are returning validation. I'm using camel case validation, or let's say what? Validates. Camel case validate form. This is a function that we are here to create in what? JavaScript. So this is what? Who can tell us what is this? This is JavaScript what? Implementation attributes. Are you with me? So you only need this when you are implementing JavaScript what? Inline. So what we are saying is that what? You remember that you were taught that in PHP, this action is what will trigger the form processing. Now, but as far JavaScript is concerned, this one is the one we are using to trigger the JavaScript action. Now, I need to create what? An input. Obviously, remember what an input does, right? An input, and the input type is what? Text. And then because I am going to use one of the most used JavaScript DOM method, which is what? Document.what? Get element by ID. There is need for me to add what? ID. And the ID, I want to name it username. Username. Because that is one thing that I'm going to validate. So if somebody did not enter the username, there will be what? An error message. So I am going to select it in JavaScript. So the next thing is I want to add, do we still remember what we described as placeholder? I know it has been a while. You must have used all this to eat rice. That is why I'm serious. You should know what is called placeholder. Eh? Good luck. Do you know what is called placeholder? Do you still remember what is called placeholder? Eh? What is placeholder, sir? Eh? It will hold text. Okay, logically, let's assume you got it. Okay, so we want to give them an example, right? They should enter your what? Your name.
just for them to know what to type in the input. Now, we are still inside the form. We have to create a button. We have to create a button in order to implement the action. And we have to add a type because we are, remember that we can also use input to get the button, right? Submit. And we can also use what? Button, what? Tag. But if you are using button tag, we have to add what? Type, and then specify that what? This button is for what? Submit. All right. So there have to be a word that they will see to know that, oh, there's a button somewhere. So we can just give it any name. But in this case, let's say what? We want to name it submit. All right. So now, we need to create another element, but this element is coming outside the form. Another element, but it's coming outside the form. One of the example we did last time, when we use inner words, when we use a text contents to manipulate the content of what? An element. Remember that we did something. We created additional p tag in order to implement the changes on the H2, right? So when they click and if they are trying to submit the form, probably maybe the username has not been given, we will need an element to display the error that they are going to see if they are doing the otherwise, if they are not doing the right thing. So I will just bring what? P tag outside the form because I just want to use it to what? To regulate what the form could be doing. So I will give it an ID, error, just to know what I want to achieve with it. So this is what will be used to output what? The error what? Message. If the person fails to fill probably what? The username, which you need. Because there must be an element that carries that message. So this brings us to the end of HTML aspects. Now we can now go to the JavaScript. So in JavaScript, the first thing is for you to create a function called what? Validate what? Form. Are you with me? That is the first thing to create. So I will say, remember the function declaration syntax. What is the function declaration syntax again? You start with the function what? Keyword. Don't forget, right? Followed by the function what? Name. What is the name of the function? Exactly what you put here is what you bring in as what? The name of the function. It must align. So I will advise you to copy and what? Paste it so that there won't be error in type. So now remember that a function has a curly what? Bracket in order to define what? The scripts. What exactly do you want to achieve? Now I will now store the function, the method. The first thing is to go to HTML and select the elements with an ID username. So how do I travel to HTML while I'm here? I will say let name equals to document, let name equals to what? Document dot what? Get element by what? ID. Then what is the ID? Remember the ID is what? User what? Name. So this is actually the element you are capturing at the moment. From what I explained the other time, now listen. I am introducing something that I have not used. The other time we stopped like this, right? We stopped like this when we wanted to style. We stopped like this. Then we now do what? Name.style. The CSS what? Property. But now this is going to be dynamic. We do not know what the user is going to type inside that input that you have just selected as what? Username. Remember that this is going to provide a box, right? At the moment, if I ask you, do you know what they are going to type there that will be validated? You don't know it. So what you tell JavaScript is that what? That capture whatever value. Capture what? Whatever what? Value. You now concatenate what? Value. Before you end it. That is what? You have created, you have positioned the script in a way that whatever that comes in there, take it. Because at the moment, it's empty. We don't even know what the user is going to impute. I don't know if I'm making sense. So that is the essence of what? Is what? Get this element, then, and its what? Value. Now, it is the value of that element that will now be compared to know whether what? The criteria is met, so that JavaScript will not display what? Error, or the criteria is not met, so that JavaScript will call what? Error message. So now we go to the next line. So once we are done with this, then we need to also capture the error message. So I will now also do what? Let error equals to get element, sorry, document what? Document dot get element by ID. So I would like somebody to tell me which one are you capturing from HTML now? Which of the elements are you capturing now? This, right? Because you just capture what? The input. So we want to capture this. So what is the ID? The ID is what? Is this. Control C and then paste it inside. All right? Now, we are leaving this one this way because that does not require collecting data from the user, right? That is why we are not putting what? Dot value. Am I communicating? So now, once we are done with this, we can now create our if statements. If statements, because we are going to create true value and false value. If the user imputes their username, that error message will not what? Display. So that is why we have to bring in what? If statement here. So bringing if statement, we simply say what? If, so you will not be comparing. What are you comparing? Name, knowing that you have captured user input in what? In name here. Hope you know that. So this name means what? You are indirectly talking about what? This input. So if name, if that input, because you have first of all capture it and store it in what? In name. Good. So now if name is equals to, hope you should remember this. Now, the difference between 3 equals to, that is what? It must be exact the name. It must be exactly the name. That is when you use what? 3 equals to. Equals to. Now, what you are going to do is to put an empty word string. Do you know why I put this empty string? Because we don't know the name yet. The value we supply it, the dot value, because the element will be captured, and the value the person will impute, and then it will not capture it and save it in what? In name. Does anybody understand the logic? What did you say here? You said something here that what? From here to this place, you capture what? The whole of this. Are you with me? Now, here, you now attach the value that will come inside that text box, which you do not know yet. Now, you are now saying that what? Once the person starts imputing value in the box, that value will have been captured by this and stored what? In name. Are you getting it? Now, once that name is compared, so that name will now be what? Bring in here. So let's continue. Let's finish writing it. You get the logic. So if is equals to, remember the syntax of if. We have to bring in what? The curly bracket to define the what? The statement. So what is the statement? What do you want to compare? You now say what? Error. So error is what? A variable. Hello? This is error variable. Error means what? You have captured what? The P what? Element, and is now stored in what? Error. So now error dot what? We want to capture the text. Error dot what? Text what? Content. Error dot text content. So equals to form. This one is a statement that will be outputted via the what? The p tag. This particular p tag. Remember that we left it what? Blank. So we are indirectly what? Sending what is going to display. Equals to form submitted. So if there is name, so the form will show what? Submitted successfully. Form submitted successfully. And then we end the code there. Now, S, this one is a true statement. S, I believe you still remember this now from conditional statement. S. So how will you know if the form, the name, or the form is not or the username is not what? Submitted. S, that is S, error. So is this same variable that we display the content? Error dot text contents equals to error dot okay. So let me write this one. Hold on. I think we are going to, let me just write this one. If you are writing in your notes, just hold on. I'm going to make some adjustments. So error dot content, text content equals to form submitted. Submitted successfully. Now, this particular one, we have to edit it. This should be the name. Here should be changed to name field. Name field cannot be empty. Name field cannot be empty. So just to attach some CSS, so I can just say error. Error is part of what we have done before. Error dot what? Style. This one is not compulsory. We just want to enhance the appearance. Error dot color equals to the red to end it. Now, here, we now add the same error just to display the appearance. It's not also compulsory. Error dot style dot color, just to be able to differentiate once you say the color. Dot color, let's say this one is green. Right, so here return
return true. Return what? True. End it there. All right, so let's look at the communication again. So what we are checking here is that the contents must be checked. That it must not be what? Empty. That if name is empty, can you see it now? If name is what? Empty, because there's no value. Error dot what? Test content. That is, manipulate what? The element content, and then write this for the user to see, to know that, oh, I have not filled what? The user's name what? Field. Now let's go and run this and see whether we will get that error if you try to submit this form without the user's name. So let's try, let's say you try submit it. Did you get the message now? I'm trying to submit it without filling what? Anything, empty. So you're checking it. That is what you are getting. It's flashing it what? Name field cannot be what? Empty. So let me put a name and click on what? Submit. You see what? Successfully. So let's try it now, everybody. Let's try it. Copy it once you have confirmed it to your notes.
Let's quickly talk about query selector all. You know, the one we did the other time was what? Query what? Selector. So we have query selector, and then we have query selector all.
Query selector all. So let's start with the definition. What is query selector all? So query selector all, remember that is also case sensitive. The S and the A, both of them should be what? Capital letter. So query selector all in JavaScript, or is a JavaScript method used to select multiple HTML elements. Used to select multiple HTML elements. Because the one of selector could only select what? One. So whenever you want to capture multiple elements at once, you use what? Query selector all. Are you there? Select multiple HTML elements at once based on a CSS selector. Based on a CSS selector. Based on a CSS selector. Note,
it returns a node list. Remember, in our last class, I explained what node could mean, right? Do you remember what is called node? It returns a node list. For example, now, is this body tag a node? Hello, this body tag here, is it a node? A node, right? That envelope was all this, right? Good. So let's quickly look at the syntax before we go for the application. So the syntax will be this: document dot query selector or query selector Then inside it, you have your CSS selector. So this is the syntax. I hope you write it down. This is the syntax. So which means that what? This is the HTML element, right? Why this is the method. So this is still working in alignment with the way CSS works. When I was explaining the selector, I explained it just like the way when you class an element in CSS, you start with what? Dot, right? When you ID an element in CSS, you start with what? Hash. So it works with the same principle. That is why you kept hearing me using the word what? CSS selector. That is what the way CSS selects elements. So let's look at the example. So the first part of the example is your HTML element. So let's say I have p tag, and I want to give all these p elements the same word ID. I want to give them the same ID. The same ID, and the ID could be item, let's say for example. And then I just want something to be visible on the page. So I'll just put what? Let's say welcome to my JS training. So I want to copy this, Ctrl C, paste it in multiple places. Let's say what? 3 more places. So I want to select all of them at once. You know, even in CSS, when you class multiple elements with the same name, what do you intend to do? You want all of them to be affected. If, for example, if you have to give color, right? So the same logic here. So now let's go to the JavaScript section and apply this. So let me create a different word script just to write on this HTML element. So I'll start by declaring a variable with what? Cost, and I'll name it what? Items. Item equals to, then I want to capture them using the DOM method, document dot what? From the syntax, dot query, right? Query what? Selector all. Because we want to capture multiple what? Elements. Query selector all. Now, remember that what? The ID, are they string or numbers? They are string, right? So remember in CSS, we still reference what? This. Now, because they are class element, I will do what? Dot what? Item. So this is the reason why you had me using the same word CSS, because the same way CSS operates when you want to speak to what? A class element. So I will end it here. So now I want to iterate. So I'm using another DOM property, which is called what? For each. For each, just like looping, right? For each. We mentioned it when we're talking about what? Those DOM what? Properties. So I will just call the name of the variable, which I've already stored in my JavaScript item, then concatenate it with what? For each. For each. For each, because you want it to span across what? Multiple what? Items. For each. For each is a function in this context. So if it's a function, you have to also declare what? The function keyword, and then followed by the function what? Parenthesis bracket. And what are you giving to the function? The HTML elements. And then while you are still inside this, you now open your coiling what? Bracket. Then you now expand it. So what exactly do you want to do on those elements after selecting them? You want to manipulate their color. So which means that what? You now look at it here. We talk about listen. when we were dealing with function, we mentioned function without parameter, right? And function with what? Parameter. So where you call elements, it means that what is a parameter that is here to receive what? Value. Just like a variable that you declare, like an empty variable, yet to be given what? Value. So that is why I will now say elements because I've acknowledged it in the function. Then dot what? Style, because I want the style. That is CSS. Then dot color. Dot color equals to, let's say, blue. Then I'll simply end my code. And of course, I need to end this section also. So who can tell us what this will display? What will this display? Huh? It will display what? Let me hear from another person. You, what will it display? What item will it display with blue color? Good. So let's go there and check. It displays them. Let me refresh, but the color is not implemented. Can we debug it out? Let's check. Is there any spelling that is not correct? So check your own. You can apply it. Let's see if yours is working. So that can help my debugging. Third class element. This is not ID. But what we did here is what? ID. So which means that what I am supposed to use here is what? Class. For me to go with this. So since I'm working with this, I have to go with what? Hash. So if I go back there, you can see it now. If you use class, that is where you use dot. If you use ID, you use what? Hash. So the same way CSS work. So yeah, let's quickly achieve that quickly. Most of these things where you start even using ChatGPT to generate code, you are going to be seeing that we see all these things there. So the only benefit is that you'll not be able to understand what each of the lines does. That is why I'm trying to see how we can touch what really matters. So let's quickly look at JavaScript array. JavaScript array. JavaScript array. So you actually go home with a lot of assignment here. JavaScript array. Now, let's look at the definition of what? Array. An array is a list-like structure. Is a list-like structure that stores multiple values in a single variable. Is a list-like structure. It's not that guy. Is a list what? Like structure that stores multiple what? Value in a single what? Variable. You know, for us to be able to store let's say 3 different values, we created 3 different variables, right? So the idea is that instead of you multiplying or duplicating variables, just because you want to store multiple value, you can decide to adopt array as another way of doing it. So for example, let me see if I can have another. So for example, JS array. JavaScript array
So example here, let's say as a task given to you as a programmer, create an array to store 4 fruits. Could be any item, 4 fruits. So ordinarily you will have you have to create a variable, you store the first fruit, another variable, the second fruit. So you have to create up to 5 or 4 different variables. But with the array concept, we will easily achieve that just in one variable. So what is the structure, the syntax? The syntax is what you have to pay attention to. Now, we want to create this array, and at the same time, we would like to store it in a variable. So we'll say, since it's a variable, we say let's what? Fruits, right? Because we said storing multiple value in what? One variable. That's why we are still using the variable keyword. Now, the same principle, you use the square brackets. This is one option. We have array constructor. Array constructor. But this one is using what? Syntax or logic to get it. Now, if you are using this method, you have to envelope all the values in what? The square bracket. Now, if the values are string, you have to quote them. If the values are number, you do not need what? Quoting them. Then all you need to do is to separate them. So the list of fruits, are they string or number? They are string. Let's say what? Mango. So you declare all of them inside, comma, and then the next one is, let's say what? Pineapple. Pineapple. What is the spelling of pineapple that time? Is it E? E what? Is here A after this E? E A, right? Pineapple like this, right? Double P. Okay. Now we are creating an array of how many fruits? How many? 4. So the next one is let's say cashew. Let's say cashew. Don't know if my spelling of cashew is still correct. Is it correct? Cashew, yeah. Then the next one is let's say apple. So we end our code. Now, if I want to display this, I can use any of those methods, but let me use the one I said that require using HTML element to render it. So which is what? I'll just create p tag and then give it just to render, just to output what? Those arrays value. So I'll just give it ID. ID, I can say, let's say demo 2, just to use it to display this. So I will now come here and say document, because I have to output it, document dot what? Get elements by ID, by ID, by ID. Then remember, by ID, what is the ID? What is the ID? The ID is what? Demo what? 2. Now, we are storing it in inner HTML. So inner HTML, and then equals to what? The array what? Name. Are you getting it? The array what? Name. So, but if I want a description to be printed out, so I will just put what? String here. Put string here. I will say, I will concatenate it. I'll come here and say, the values in fruit array are So if I run it on the browser, I should be able to get it. You can see it. The values in the fruit array are mango. They are mentioned. So that is array. So if I want to print only mango from this array using the index, what will be the code? What will be the code? Fruits, right? Bracket, what? I'll write 0. Then I will now do what? I should run it. I should run it, right? Did they output it? Who can tell us what we will do? We want to print only. You have idea what to do for us to display this? Let's factor it out.
I'll put it where? Inside this document, right? So it means that I'll take this and put it here. Okay, so let's go there. I'll put it here, right? Okay, so let's go there. Perfect. Or you can just write another word, document.getElement by that same ID, if you still want to retain the previous one.
Do you understand that? That is accessing array what? Element with what? The index number.
So to close with, we have what we call array methods. Right, array methods. Right, JavaScript array method. Let me quickly talk about that before I end this. JavaScript array method. So how do we define this set of functions, right? Array method are different inbuilt functions in JavaScript which are used to manipulate the elements of an array. Which are used to manipulate the elements of an array. Used to manipulate the elements of an array. So for example, you have created an array here and you are asked to what? To add more. So let's look at this, how to. So the first one I want to teach us is what? Push. So example of what? JavaScript array method. The first one we want to look at is what? Is push. So you are going to go and research more on them. They are much. They are up to even more than 30. It's just for you to know the ones that are very important. So you see JavaScript code coming at some point with all this method. So when you see them, you need to know what they are doing. So how do we define push? Push add item or element. Item or element to the end of an array. So anytime you want to add another item to an existing array and you want that item to come after the last one, then you use what? Push. So instead of you coming back to manually add, look at it here. If you don't understand this method, what you will have done is to come here and put a comma and add that what? Element. But what we are saying is that this is hard coding. It has to be soft, which means that I don't have to go back to where I created it. I should have a way of sending the value into it. So what is the syntax? The syntax will simply be, the syntax will mean that you reference that what? Array that you want to update. This is just like you are updating it, which is what? Fruits, right? Then you now concatenate the method, which is what? Push. Okay? You concatenate it. Now, after this, you have to reprint before you can get the updated copy. Are you with me? So I have to reprint. So how do I reprint? I have to copy what? The whole of this, just to save my time. I'll bring it here because the code runs from the top. So when it gets here, it will add it, and then when it gets here, it will now output the new one with what? The old one. That is the sequence. So I'll now come here and say, okay, let me know be after printing that additional information. Let me just print only the array value. So I'll end it here. So if I go back to what item did we add? We did not even specify what we are adding. So we have to what? Is a string, right? We have to put it in string and then specify the name, which of the elements we have not, which fruit we have not captured. Somebody should give me fruit name. Orange, good. Orange. So you can see that the orange is added. Where did he add it? The end. So that is the work of that push. Can we verify it shortly, quickly, everybody?
Anyone research and apply additional 10 JavaScript array methods or functions. So our next class will start with introduction to Bootstrap so that we can start creating or implementing responsiveness and some core JavaScript functions.